Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Sarah Abosh-Jacobson, the Chief Education, Programs and Exhibitions Officer here at the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum. And I'd like to welcome all of you to tonight's program, Driving the Change, a conversation with Beau, Chandler, and Major Jiminez. I'd like to start by thanking our community partners for this program. We sincerely appreciate your ongoing support of the museum. Faith Forward Dallas at Thanksgiving Square, Legacy Senior Communities, Mosaic Family Services, Reach of Dallas, SMU Human Rights Program, Southwest Jewish Congress, and The Family Place. I'd also like to give a special welcome to our museum members joining us this evening. Thank you all so much for your continued support of the museum. We could not put on programs like this one without you. And finally, thank you to our board members for being such champions of the museum. I know several of you are tuning in this evening. So this evening, we are very pleased to present this program as part of our permanent exhibition highlight series, which provides an in-depth look into different parts of our permanent exhibit. Shortly, we will hear from Major and Beau about their fight for marriage equality, a journey that is highlighted in the LGBTQ rights strand in our Pivot to America wing. And if you haven't been to the museum yet, we invite you to visit and explore this history. After our conversation, we will have plenty of time for questions. Please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to type out and submit your questions, and we will answer as many as we can. I'm really happy to be talking with Beau and with Major Jiminez tonight from the museum. Socially distanced, of course, that's why we're sitting across the stage this way. And I wanted, before I started, to just give you a little bit of the history that we have at the museum with Major and Beau. So Major and Beau came to our grand opening celebration in September of 2019. I can't believe it's been more than a year. It's amazing. And they told me they were here at 9:30 in the morning, ready to go. And then in early October of 2019, we got a letter from Major and Beau telling us that they had been through the exhibit, they loved the exhibit, they had become members of the museum, and saying that they had a story to tell, that they had been involved in the fight for marriage equality, specifically in Dallas, and if we were interested, they were talking. And I wrote back and I said, "You betcha." And then we ultimately, they came in and we met and we had a long conversation. It was a strange conversation because frequently when you have a conversation with somebody who's going to be giving you a testimony, it's kind of a reserved and distant conversation. And I sat across the table from the two of them and just felt like we had been sitting there chatting amongst friends and that I had known them for forever. It was really amazing. They came back in January of 2020, and we actually took their testimony about their experiences, and that's what we're going to talk about this evening. So thank you for joining us. I think you're in for a very interesting evening. I guess the one thing I would want to do before we go any further is to kind of background why we're having this conversation. And it gets back to what you told me when you wrote to me initially to give your testimony about having looked at the strands in the air section up in the museum. So for those of you who don't know, we have a section of the museum, a wing called the Pivot to America wing, and in that we have an American Ideals Reality Repair Gallery. What that means is we feature 12 strands of different groups who have made their mark in American society as they have navigated the process from the American Ideals foundational documents through the reality that has not always lived up to the promise of those foundational documents, and ultimately the repair process that helps to bring the reality that these particular groups have experienced more closely into alignment with our ideals. And in the section that deals with LGBTQ rights, we start with the year 1610. And it's an interesting starting point because in 1610, the Virginia colony banned male sodomy, making it punishable by death. So it's that early in our history that some of our founders thought it was necessary to address this problem, and I'll put problem in quotation marks. The LGBTQ section in AIR goes through our history and ultimately ends up in 2013 with the passage of Lawrence versus Texas, which is the U.S. Supreme Court that rules the U.S. Supreme Court decision that rules that sodomy laws, Texas's, because they're still on the book, but sodomy laws across the U.S. are unconstitutional. So that's an illustration of kind of the arc of ideals reality repair, and as the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. used to sometimes say, the arc of the moral universe, it runs to justice, and I'm paraphrasing, but it sometimes runs long. And this is an example of long. And then the item that we end that section of the exhibit on is 2015 and the passage of Oberfeld v. Hodges, which rules that same-sex marriage is lawful in the United States. And I think we'll probably come back to talk about that a little bit later this evening. But I just wanted to give everybody a sense of what we're talking about when we talk about this kind of reality repair area. So let's start with your backgrounds. Could you each tell me, please, a little bit about how you grew up and how you came to Texas, or if you always were in Texas? I'll do it first Beau, then Major, and then I'll do first Major, then Beau. We'll mix it up. So Beau, could you start, please?
Sure, I will. Again, thank you for having us tonight. I grew up in Kansas. It was a little town, about 400 people. One of my friends actually might be watching that I went to school with. And gay was not really a thing there. It wasn't talked about. We didn't know what it was. Kind of got a clue when I saw Boy George on television as a child, and I thought, that's different, and I think I'm like that. And so it was kind of a hero moment, like, oh, I can do anything because look, this guy is on TV. Came to Texas when I was 18 years old. My mom wanted me to come here and finish high school because she was moving to South Texas, Kerrville. And I graduated from there and went back to Kansas for a little while, some college. And then I ended up in Dallas when I was 25, and I've been here since. I love this city.
Major?
All right, well, I come from a military family, so I was actually born in France, but 6 months after I was born, we moved to Wichita Falls. So that's here in Texas. And so, being a military family, we moved all over the place, but I ultimately ended up going to high school in El Paso, Texas. And it was pretty much then that I started my, I came out to myself in 1977 and started standing up for our rights back then with an act in high school when they said that, you had to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And I wouldn't, because I said they're not standing up for me as an individual, as a gay individual. So I got in trouble for that. So, it just kind of went downhill from there, I guess.
Could each of you talk a little bit about how old you were and what it was like when you began to share your experiences with family and friends that you were gay? And Major, you just said something very interesting. You said, I came out to myself first. Explain what you mean by that, and then let us know about coming out to others as well.
Well, that's kind of an interesting story, too, because I happened to be in San Francisco visiting a relative, and I went downtown, and that was the same day that Anita Bryant had won her victory in Florida saying no gay teachers. So I'm almost 17 years old, and all of a sudden the bus had to stop, and all these people were just walking across the street and saying, gay is just as good as straight. And I'm like, oh, I think I'm where I need to be. And so I joined the parade is what I thought it was, but it was a protest against Anita Bryant. And so by the end of that day, I said, this is who I am. I know who I am. I'm gay. And so that was in June of '77. And then it was actually Halloween of 1977 that I told my mom that I was gay. And so she said, I've always known, honey, I still love you. And so I knew that I had a pretty successful, a pretty nice thing at home.
So it
support.
wasn't a big trauma when you came out, at least
Not for me, it wasn't.
Okay. Beau?
I wish that mine were that calm. I was 17 years old and still in high school, and I had met someone who decided that they would educate me on what it means to be gay. And they sent me an Advocate magazine that was intercepted by my mother. And she decided that I needed repair. And she took me to a psychologist, and in his office I saw a guitar case on the floor that had a rainbow sticker on it. And I had recently discovered what that meant. And he proceeded to tell her that your son doesn't have a problem, but you might need to talk to me about your ability to accept that. And I think that helped start pivoting her attitude a little bit. But I was outed at school by my girlfriend at the time. She wanted to do certain things, and I said that I couldn't. And she figured out why. And I was tortured. And that's part of the reason that we actually ended up in Texas is my mom decided that since my brother lived in Texas, we could move the family here and start over. And so she kind of saved me from that last year of high school there.
When you say start over, was the starting over supposed to encompass your not being gay as well, or she was accepting it by this point and just looking to give you a fresh start?
I think perhaps she might have clung to the idea that maybe it was a phase, and if she gets me into a new environment, then, well, he'll change his mind. Nah, I was really into the B-52s by then, so.
It was all over.
Oh, yes.
Major, could you talk a little bit more? You mentioned that you come from a military family. I remember when we originally spoke that you had said that you had initially been thinking about going into the military, or your father had been thinking about you going into the military. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, with both my parents were actually in the military, and it was kind of expected that I would go in. My brother went in, and so then I was going to go in, and my parents said, or my dad said, they have lots of gays in the military. You just have to stay, you don't tell anybody about it. Stay in the closet. And I couldn't figure out how I could do that. When they tell you to, you're not supposed to lie, and then I'm going to have to go and lie about that. And it was a pretty serious lie back then. So the night before I was supposed to go enlist or sign the papers, I just told my parents, I said, I can't do this. I can't live a lie in the military. And so, we had to work that out, and then I kind of made my way back to Texas from there because it was like my dad's like, you've got to figure out something. I'm like, well, I'll just go back to Texas and see what I can figure out.
So you had talked about your mother being very accepting of your homosexuality when you told her. What about your father? Because you never mentioned that.
Well, like I said, after I came out, then I was going to go into the military after that. And so my dad had actually set me up to talk with one of his friends there at the hospital who he knew was gay. And again, the guy was like, you just have to just not say anything about it. You have to not be gay, that nobody can find out. And obviously I have this kind of a gay accent, so it's kind of hard to hide. So, I didn't think I could pull it off.
Okay. But it's interesting. So both your parents, it sounds like, came around very quickly. Your mother took longer, but it wasn't kind of the classic story that I grew up hearing of, I came out to my parents and they threw me out of the house, because I knew that growing up in upstate New York.
No, we were both very fortunate about that.
Very fortunate, yes.
All right. Okay. Can both of you talk about your involvement in activism prior to 2012, because 2012 is where we're heading with this, gentlemen, in case you didn't remember. Protests, the March on Washington, protests in Austin and D.C., and I know that Major, you started you became the accidental protester in San Francisco. So why don't you kind of bring us forward from that, and then we'll go to you, Beau. Okay.
Okay. Well, after I came out, in San Francisco, and then I came out to my parents, just as then was the Anita Bryant thing. She was doing her tour, and so she was coming through El Paso, and I actually have a friend who might be watching as well. Her name is Nancy. She and I went to the El Paso Civic Center to protest. We had our little signs, and it said, I don't remember what they said right off the top of my head right now, but we had our signs, gay is just as good as straight, and 2468, things like that. And, but one of the signs, she and I went there expecting a whole crowd of people protesting, because we had seen protesters across the United States. We were the only two there. Everybody else was there to see Anita Bryant. So it kind of didn't work out so good for us, but we held our ground.
I was actually not really involved so much in protesting before him. He introduced me to, what was the name of the equality in Texas? Get Equal Texas, that's it. And we began to protest for marriage equality with them as a group. But he, through our action in 2012, really put me into the mindset where, yeah, an individual can make a difference. You really can if you speak up for yourself.
Major, were you involved in any of the earlier the Pride parades or anything like that before 2012?
Oh yeah, I was always involved with every Pride parade we ever had in Dallas. And in the mid '80s, when the AIDS epidemic started, that became our focus. We were fighting for medicines, we were fighting for acceptance, we were fighting for the chance to be in the hospital rooms with our partners. Because prior to marriage equality, if you weren't a spouse or a family member, they could tell you can't come in here. And that was hard on a lot of these people. Your spouse of 20 years is passing away and you can't be in there with them because of their family or because of some person in the hospital. So we were fighting for that all the time, but we were mostly trying to take care of our brothers who were dying from AIDS.
One other question, and then we'll move on, because Anita Bryant was so central to this, particularly in San Francisco, and one of the ways that the San Francisco gay community was able to fight back was by refusing to serve drinks with orange juice, and they boycotted, and it worked. And I'm just curious if there were ever any ramifications. You were a bartender for more than 30 years subsequent to that. Any hostility to orange juice in any of this, or at least kind of a feeling of pride every time you serve it in a drink?
Well, there was always the orange juice incident, especially back then. But even since then, over the years, we saw that some of the liquor and beer companies were giving money to other organizations, but they weren't giving money to the gay people or the gay organizations. And we're thinking we spend just as much money as anybody else. And there was a very, very couple of public protests against a couple of brand names of beer over the years where we
Can you say the brand names?
If you're stating historical fact, absolutely, please state.
Well, it was Coors Light, and then we poured out a bunch of Miller Lite one time at the intersection of Throckmorton and Cedar Springs because they just weren't giving any money back to the gay community, and we thought that they should in order to be fair.
All right, moving beyond those early protest stories, tell me how the two of you met.
Go ahead.
Well, we originally, of course, we met online, but we didn't meet each other for many, many, many months after that. And then we were at a benefit at one of the local gay bars, and it's one of those. I looked over and I'm like, oh, there he is, And so I went over there and we started talking, and that's kind of how it went.
He was a member of an organization that I respected, and they were doing this benefit for the Dallas community to raise money to be spent in the Dallas community. And yeah, I spotted him from across the way, and I really wanted to talk to him, and I really wanted to get involved. And when I went over there to talk to him, he basically invited me in to assist. And yeah, we've pretty much been inseparable since that day.
It's kismet, or in the Jewish world, we call it beshert, where it's just meant to be. So very interesting. So how do you get from that to your 2012? What year is that, first of all? Let's start there.
Well, we met originally in 2010, and
Okay.
then met in person, and all that in 2011, and then by the time we're, getting together after the benefit and everything, it's 2012.
Okay.
Spring or end
So
of
you
December.
pretty quickly decided that this was the real deal, and you were in it for marriage.
Well, when
Yeah, it was fast. It
Okay.
really was.
when you meet somebody, any couple they know. I don't know, not any couple. I see couples that drag their engagements out for years, but to me, we knew, and so we got together. We moved in together, and then President Obama had his epiphany about marriage equality. And when he had his epiphany, we decided, people are going to be on board with this now. If the president, because what presidents say matter, and when he's saying that he's on board with it, we thought, well, maybe we should go down and apply for a marriage license. Well, they're not going to give it to us, but we can make a statement and apply anyway.
Hold on. Had one of you already asked the other to marry? I mean, have we gone through? I just want to make sure we're checking the boxes, gentlemen.
Well, after we met, we were together, like I said, inseparably, and barely, any time apart. And we moved in together, and he wanted to make breakfast one day, and I thought, okay, well, we'll do the breakfast thing. So he's in the kitchen, he's rattling the pots and pans, and I'm just playing on my computer like always. And pretty soon, he okay, breakfast is ready. So I go over, and it's blueberry pancakes, my favorite, which I think he knew. I think we'd had that conversation. So we sit down to blueberry pancakes, and we're eating, and I spotted this little thing inside my pancake, and it looked like a little piece of plastic, and I thought, oh, he's got some of the packaging in here, and I wanted to be nice, so I'm not going to say anything, so I'm scraping the little plastic off to the side of the plate, and there's a ring in it. And so I picked it up, all sticky with syrup, of course, but opened it up, and he came over and got down on one knee, and I said yes. I think even before he asked, I was already saying yes.
Okay. Now, fast forward to June of 2012. So I just wanted to make sure we had done this right. Okay. Now we're going to go protest for marriage equality. So tell me about that. What really drove that decision, and what did you do about it?
I think it was a mutual decision. We wanted to make that statement in particular. We knew that we wouldn't get it, but we also thought if we could bring enough people's attention to this, now that the president is behind it, of course, could we, two people, individuals in Dallas, Texas, make a difference? And as we began to discuss the idea of doing this, we thought, well, what if we refuse to leave? Just civil disobedience this to the maximum. Would they arrest us? And if they did, would that be even more bigger, brighter attention on the issue? So let's try it. So we started talking amongst our people that we were protesting with at the time. Oh my God, excuse me. I'm so sorry about that. And we ended up talking to the police as well, and kind of got them involved and mentioned that we were planning on an arrest. And so they said, yes, you absolutely can do that. Warned us about our record, that sort of thing. We ended up telling enough people about it that there was a good crowd down there at the time. And you want to...
Well, and then, the media was there because they had been alerted as to what was going to be going on. So, we went in there, we applied for our marriage license. The lady refused. She told us what the code was in the Texas code, that why she had to refuse. And then we explained to her that we were sorry about that, but we wanted a marriage license, so we're not going to leave until you give us one. And then that's where that started with the protest.
And she wanted to give us one enough that she was in tears when she had to tell us that she was not going to be able to do that. So it was an experience.
So you were told that you can't have a marriage license. You had gone there knowing that you were going to risk arrest. You said just a moment ago that you had talked to the police. Who did you talk to? How did you... did you just call DPD's main line? What did you do?
They had seen us protest before, so the Dallas Police Department has a liaison for the LGBTQ community, and she was there, and she came over and talked with us. Her name is Laura, and we had a nice chat, and she explained what was going to happen if we didn't leave. And so we said we were aware of that, and we're still going to stick with it.
Okay, so the clerk, you're in the building. The clerk turns you down. She's clearly reluctant to do so, but she does what she has to do by law. She's doing her job. Then what happened?
And then we decided, I think we said out loud, if you're not going to give us a license, we will wait to be served. And at that point, we sat down, handcuffed each other together, and refused to move, and sat in the front of the line. And repeatedly saying, when they said, next person, we're next, but you're not going to serve us. And they simply moved the line around us. And so people were still going. Some people were unaware of what was going on, who had come in after we'd made all of this statement. They were actually pretty supportive. The other couples that were there who were allowed to get marriage licenses.
How long were you chained and sitting on the floor there?
It was the afternoon. I don't remember exactly what time we got there, but they closed at 4:30, I believe.
I believe at that time.
It's been a while now. I don't remember what time, but we were there for a few hours.
Yeah.
So what happens next? They're not going to serve you, and you're not going to move. So now what?
So now the building is closing. So you can't stay after. They explained that to us. We knew it. We had spoken with the police that we would be arrested if we did refuse to leave. So they've closed the building, and we're there, and the police they've sent everybody out, including the news media. So it's just literally us and the police together. And the man who, Sergeant, I'm not sure what their structure is, the man who seemed to be in charge of them came to us and said, at this point, you can choose to leave. We'll take you out, escort you through a tunnel under the building. No one will see you. You'll save face. They'll think you were arrested and you've made your statement. Or you can refuse, and we can actually take you to jail. And, we were there for that purpose, so we said, you're going to have to take us to jail. At which point, they wanted to uncuff us, which didn't work out so well for them. We'd brought our own handcuffs, never mind how we got them. And so they attempted to use their key to unlock our handcuffs, and it wasn't working out for them. And I think you finally gave them the appropriate
I had
key.
the key hanging around my neck, so we had to use my key to unhandcuff our handcuffs, and then they handcuffed each one of us individually, and they had to escort us down the elevator and down through the hallway, and by then that's where everybody was, and they watched us get put into separate police cars and taken down to Lou Sterrett, which is our local jail.
What happened then? Were you fingerprinted, photographed, the whole 9 yards?
No, that was kind of a crazy mess right there, because they arrest a lot of people in Dallas every day. And so we weren't the only ones in there, and they keep you in groups of 50. And they have television monitors up, that you can watch, but they have no sound. So right when we go walking in, we look up on the TV and our picture's on the television. So it wasn't very long before they're like, making the connection. What are y'all in here for? So it's like 48 other men who've been accused of any number of crimes asking us why we're in jail, and we said because we wouldn't leave when they wouldn't give us a marriage license. And they were like, really? Really? That's what you're in here for? Really?
And they were actually very supportive, surprisingly, because I didn't know what to expect, and I was almost a little hesitant to even say anything. But yeah, and they couldn't believe it, that we were arrested for just wanting to get married. And we made sure they understood to each other.
So you're at the jail. Do they take you in front of a judge? Do they put you in a cell? I mean, what are the next steps? What happens?
Well, they take all your things and sign some papers, and then they fingerprint you, and then they take your pictures, and then they put you in front of the judge, and he says what the bond is going to be, and but we kind of knew what the bond might be, so we were prepared we had about $1,000 in our pocket, so we could bond ourselves out in the event that it worked out that way, which luckily for us that time it did.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just going to mention that we hadn't eaten much during the day, and as we're waiting in line to be processed for this, they brought around these sandwiches, I guess you might call them. They were not delicious looking. And I, of course, refused mine. And he ate mine. He actually ate that sandwich. I had to point that out.
I was hungry, and so I ate my little sandwich. And
I was going to say, Beau, in conditions like that, it's every man for himself. I'm with Major on this.
This is true.
So you get out. Was there any fallout from this in terms of your public friendships, your public persona, your jobs, or was this just kind of a one and done, or do you go on beyond this? What comes next?
Well, for my job personally, I got an email from someone that I didn't know within where I was working at the time. I can say where it was? At Children's Medical Center. I got an email from a coworker who said, hey, I saw you on the news. I saw what you did. Thank you for speaking up for us. And I was really impressed by that. I was warned by my job to, how was it they phrased it? It is an arrest, but it wasn't a violent arrest. That's okay. Let's not have that happening frequently or again, is what they really meant. So I was kind of warned, but as far as the community goes, there was some good support. There were others who were not as supportive, with other suggestions as to how we should have conducted ourselves. But for the most part, my experience was positive.
There's always people that want to tell you how to do something, and we had our way that we felt that we wanted to make our protest, and we had a lot of people telling us that was the wrong way to do it. The wrong place, the wrong time. They didn't like the ruffles, what do you call it, the waves in the water, the ripples in the water that we were causing,
They thought the attention that we were drawing might be negative as opposed to positive. So,
but we felt like it was bringing awareness. They were seeing. A lot of people didn't realize in Texas that you couldn't get married. There was only a handful of states at that time that still weren't going to allow it. And by then they didn't realize. They said, well, why don't you just get a civil union, or why don't you just go to another state and get married? But why should we have to go to another state to get married? We're like, no, we're not going to do that. And, in civil unions, that's one thing, but there's about 1,000 different things. People way smarter than me can tell you what they are, but there was about 1,000 different things that married couples just automatically get that you don't have with the civil union unless you pay hundreds of dollars with your lawyers.
And even getting married in another state, those rights don't necessarily carry over to a state that won't recognize that. So that's another issue that we were dealing with.
So you were bound and determined to get married. You got arrested the first time. You bonded out. Did you go back and protest more? What were your next steps?
No, a month later, we had our first court appearance, and we decided we'd have our court appearance and then go protest again at the marriage license counter. We had, I don't know, about 50 people with us then, and the court appearance was basically, it's a postponement, so it wasn't even a real thing. So we marched from Lou Sterrett to the marriage license counter, and we had a sit-in. Everybody was just going to sit in, apply for marriage licenses again, and get denied. But there was a security guard there that I thought was a police officer, and he got kind of ugly with us, and he said, "They already told you no, get on out of here." And then it's like, I don't think that's going to work out. So we, again, handcuffed ourselves together and sat down in the front of the line, and they just had to keep taking people around us.
And I had been warned, like I said, from my job, don't get arrested a second time. But once the security guard said that to him, I already knew it was coming. I knew at that point, oh, he's going to go back to jail. And so we had, I think, I went at some point to prepare the money because I knew that him going back to jail would require the same, what I thought would be the same amount of money as before. It wasn't.
It was more, I'm assuming.
No, they tripled the bond this time.
I'm not
because
surprised.
Yeah. Repeat offender. Terrible repeat offender. And so he was actually in quite late that evening after that arrest. And I believe, wasn't that July 5th?
No, that was in August. The first one was July 5th.
Okay, that's right.
So arrested again. What comes, because you'd had a postponement. Now you've broken the law twice. You're a scofflaw. What happens next?
Well, for him, it was easy because he'd only broken the law once. So he had his court date pretty quick. They weren't going to try us together. It was going to be an individual thing. And so we kept thinking, we can always take this to a jury trial. If they want to bring that much attention to it, we will do that. So, but for me, since I had been arrested twice, mine was a little bit more complicated. But ultimately, you can tell him.
Ultimately, we were both dismissed. Mine was dismissed with a $500 donation to the Dallas Food Bank and a certain amount of community service, which could be given to any 501c3 organization.
Uh-oh.
So,
who did you do your community service for?
Well, I came up with this idea. There's this place called Youth First Texas that used to take care of at-risk youth after school. They had lots of programs for at-risk youth. And I decided that I would do a donation program for them. And so I held a benefit at the place where he worked, the bar where he worked.
Which was a gay bar.
Yes.
I thought I should let our watchers know this. Okay.
And it was a very different sort of event. And we raised $2,500 for Youth First Texas. So,
Well done.
With the hours and time served. So.
Okay. And Major, what did you do?
Well, by the time it was getting to mine, friends in our community had organized a benefit for us. It was a dinner benefit, and they had raised about $2,000, if I recall. And so we used, instead of me having to do the community service, we made the donation that they asked of me as well, and gave the money to Youth First Texas and then the food bank.
All right. Fast forward from that. You didn't get arrested again about this, correct?
No, because I kept worrying that the next judge would say, okay, your bond is $3,000 and you're never allowed to go into that building again.
Okay.
Since you keep breaking their laws. And I eventually knew that we would get married at some point. They would change it.
Right.
And I wanted to be able to go there and kind of say, remember me?
Okay. So Oberfeld v. Hodges passes in 2015. It is now the law of the land that same-sex couples can marry. What did you do?
Well, we already had gotten married. Both of our moms were at our wedding, but it was an illegal wedding because we weren't allowed to get married in Texas. So the day that weekend, we went to Arkansas to see his mom, who had just recently been put into a nursing home, and she said she had
She had dementia, we found out at that time.
but she said, I clearly remember being at your wedding. I want to be at the next one. So we said, well, when you get better, we'll get married. Well, she never got better, and then she did pass away in October of 2015. So our whole marriage, the wedding thing, like after it became legal, we just put ours off for a little while because, we had wanted her there, and we had to deal. And my mother, one of my moms had died earlier that year, so it was just a double grief. So we waited for a little while until we thought that we were ready to just go do it on our own without a bunch of fanfare.
So when did you officially get married in Texas?
January 5th of 2017.
Okay.
The last
very nice.
freeze of that winter.
Okay. And it's working out for you.
Oh, yes.
So far.
Okay, good to know. All right. So I wanted to tell you that we were so excited when you came, shared your story, and then offered to donate artifacts from your life and your experiences. And I guess what I would ask is, why us? What was it that kind of made you decide that this was the place you wanted your kind of legacy of this event and of your personal fight for marriage equality to be housed? Why at the Dallas Holocaust Museum?
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, after our experience of coming through here and seeing the wall of upstanders and how all subjects regarding human rights were treated here with such respect and dignity, and the emotion that I think both of us felt from here, we fell in love with the place. And even though it's kind of a monument to something terrible that happened in history, we did want to be a part of something that had this kind of impact on people's lives.
Well, yes, and as you know, it's the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum, and we felt our story in the human rights aspect of it. We don't compare any of our our thing to what happened during the Holocaust, but we are very much into the human rights aspect of your museum.
Okay. And I should share with our audience that we will be bringing in an exhibit called Rise Up about the Stonewall riots and the LGBTQ movement for equality in the United States, and that there will be items from the Major and Beau collection that will supplement that, because they will help us to tell the local story. So don't worry, they're not sitting on a dusty shelf, gentlemen.
Well, see, that's nice to know. Thank you.
That's a surprise. Thank you for that.
Yeah. And we will let you know, so stay tuned. Stay tuned. So I guess the question that I have to ask, and I know that you're going to give a somewhat political answer, and that's fine. You're giving your own opinions. Is how do you both feel about the state of LGBTQ rights today? I mean, you now, as a same-sex couple, you have the right to be married. You have the right to to spousal survivor benefits, to all those kinds of things. But I am assuming, as a matter of fact, I'm not assuming, I know that there is more that you're hoping to achieve. So how do you feel we kind of stand, if there's a checklist or a ledger in the United States along that reality repair continuum?
Well, when the announcement came out that we were able to get married, one of the things that he said when they asked us to say a couple of words down at the courthouse is, okay, we've made it this far. We've gotten this piece of what we needed, but our fight is absolutely not over yet. Our trans brothers and sisters are still fighting for equality and job protections and basically just the right to exist. And so that's something that we're definitely in the fight for. There's a little bit of worry with the current political climate, expressing our opinions on this. that we could be, with the new Supreme Court justice who was just appointed, maybe in danger of taking a step back, putting these things back in the hands of states' rights. And so there's a little fear there. Hopefully we're, how did they say it? The arc of justice swings. Yes. Hopefully we have gone.
The arc of the moral universe.
Yes.
The arc of the moral universe swings toward justice. But it may
yes.
take a while to get there.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm hoping that we're past the point where we can be reversed as far as we've come, but we're still not there yet. So there's a lot of work to be done.
Well, there is a lot of work to be done because, you know, the 2016 Republican platform, which they used for the 2020 Republican platform, clearly stated that they think that the marriage equality ruling was a mistake, and they want that to be reversed, either through the courts or they want to push it back down to the states. And since we had to force Texas into allowing us to get married, I really feel like in the future, if it went to the states or any state that happens to be very conservative at the time, they could take our rights away again or not let future people get married. I don't know how they're planning to do it, but it's clearly written in their platform that they didn't like this. You know, and of course, also the deeply held religious belief that they have the right to discriminate against us. So that's going to be an ongoing fight, no matter who is in power in the White House. It's just the way that, you know, a portion of our community and our country is.
Mm-hmm. The one kind of caveat that I would give to this, and the three of us were talking about this beforehand, is that there's all kinds of things written into the party platforms, both the Democrat and Republican, many of which never see the light of day. But it's in there, so I understand the fear. So we're going to go to questions and answers in just a moment. But I guess what I wanted you to end this part with, if you can, is do you have any advice for people who are passionate about an issue, and it doesn't matter what the issue is, but are passionate about it and want to help drive change? What would you suggest to them? You know, given your own personal experiences in the American system of, you know, reality and repair.
Well, you know, there's upstanders, as we know here in the museum, and there's bystanders. You can be a bystander and just watch the world go by and not say anything. But to me, if you're just a bystander and you're not acting, Black lives do matter. We need to stand up and fight with our, you know, our friends who are Black and let them know that we're standing with them. It's just constant.
There's also, you know, write to your Congress people. They're there because they represent you. They may not be on your side. Perhaps it was a Republican when you're a Democrat, or the other way around. Write to them anyway. Make your voice heard. Social media is something that we have the ability to influence a lot of people and the ability to contact a lot of like-minded people that way. Not something that we had back in the 90s. So that is definitely a tool to be used. If there's a protest near you and you feel safe about it, go out and just see the people. If you don't feel like joining the protest, go out and take a look. See if it is for you, if that's something that would work with your personality. Talk to those people. You're going to find some of the best friends you've ever met in your life. Do it.
You know, Harvey Milk told me when I was 17 years old at that protest in San Francisco, not me personally, but the thousands that were there, that the people united will never be defeated.
Yeah.
And so that's what I would tell the young people. Don't, you know, it may be a setback or you may be afraid of something, but we need to be united in our resolve to fight for equality for all people, not just us, but for all people.
So basically, you're giving us the message: don't give up on democracy. Democracy is who we are, whether we're left, right, or center, and that we all have these rights, and the way we maintain these rights is by taking advantage of them, by using them, by protesting, by speaking, by writing. I love to hear it, gentlemen. Annie, do we have questions and answers? Well, do you have questions, and the gentleman will have answers?
I've got questions if you've got answers. You all talked a little bit about the LGBTQ liaison in the Dallas Police Department. We have some folks who didn't know that role existed. As much as you all know, what is the purpose of that position? Do you know any more about the role there?
Well, in that case, the one that we dealt with was Laura, and I'm not sure
Laura
how
Martin.
Laura Martin. Okay, and she basically her role was to communicate with those of us protesting in the larger LGBT community, the bars, the strip that we all know exists. Those people, leaders in those communities, and just make sure that the police are properly policing those areas. There are no unnecessary raids and that sort of thing that used to go on, but really that's kind of not gone on in recent times.
Well, and this kind of goes back to actually somebody you have here in the museum. Her name is Micah England, and she was a lesbian who wanted to be on the police force, and they denied her a spot because she was a lesbian. Well, that kind of led to eventually a liaison, sort of, as it moved on through the years, because they realized that they did need to have somebody who was involved, I guess, community policing and being involved with the community like they want police to be these days. And that's what they did here in Dallas with the liaison. It just switched to a new person. I'm not sure what her name is, but
You can find it on the DPD website. It'll tell you the LGBT liaison.
Great, thank you. We have a question from Kayla, who is asking if either of you have ever faced workplace discrimination as gay men. She says she's not part of the LGBTQ plus community, but she has faced disability-related discrimination in employment. So she's just curious about your history.
well, for me, I haven't. I worked in gay bars for 32 years, so it was easy for me, but it's different for other people.
I've had jobs where it just wasn't talked about. I stayed in the closet. I didn't bring up my personal life, stayed very to myself. The job that I have now, I'm private about where I work, but I will say I'm extremely proud of working there. We have a special group called the Diversity and Inclusion Group that actually puts on programs so that you can expand your career, get different contacts who might be more like you within the company to learn their secrets for climbing the ladder. And it's a different world than when I first started in the workforce. But yeah, I love my job now. And so no, I would say that sort of thing for larger companies is pretty much going away.
Good. Well, here's hoping more companies are like your current company in the near future. This question might be from someone who knows you all. I'm not sure. It says, Major, why did you decide not to run for Dallas County Clerk?
Our clerk, we didn't know which side of history he was going to end up on. And so I decided that I would shake things up a little bit because I wanted him to say, I'm for marriage equality, since that was the job that he did, or that marriages came under his department. And so I did run, I got my signatures, but it really is an invasion on your privacy when you run for office. And I found that out at the very beginning, and they were going to get up in all of your personal business. And I didn't really want to go through all that. But as a side effect of that, the current one who has that position did come out in favor of marriage equality. And then he actually signed our marriage certificate.
Came to us and spoke to us and wanted his signature on our marriage license. So that worked out well.
Good. And I think we actually just have one more question for you all. And it's about the impact you feel your arrest, your journey had on the LGBTQ community here in Dallas specifically. You all talked that it was fairly supportive, but did you get any specific responses from people who were maybe feeling inspired by your activism or anything like that?
Well, I worked in the gay bar. It even years later, it was almost weekly somebody would come up, and I was like a part of, like you go see where JFK got assassinated, you go see where the Dallas Cowboys play, and you come see this guy at this bar because he's the one that got arrested fighting for marriage equality. I was like on the sightseeing tour. So a lot of people, and they still to this day, send us messages and stuff that they think that we were very brave, that they love us, that they respected everything that we did, and that's always been nice to have that kind of support even with people that we have never met.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you both so much for sharing your story. And what I love is this is the third time I've heard it, and each time I hear more, and each time you're more forthcoming. I love it. So I want to thank everybody for having joined us this evening for Driving the Change, a conversation with Beau Chandler and Major Jiminez. And I would ask you to go to our website, dhhrm.org, to look at further program opportunities for you to see us highlight these kinds of topics. And I wish everybody a really great evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.